Hi, everybody. It's Josh. I'm back in my domestic setting here this morning to talk about some titles that I have streamed. I didn't intend to watch two things on Disney Plus. I intended to watch one, and then I got distracted by another, and I watched both, and I'm here to talk about them. So I went to Disney Plus with the intention of watching Jim Henson Idea Man, the new documentary by Ron Howard about Jim Henson and the creation of the Muppets and his life and career and all that. Huge Muppet head. We'll get to that one next, but I was distracted immediately when I opened up Disney Plus for the first time in months, and the top suggestion, the banner at the top, the first thing was The First Omen on Disney Plus. And it had a little Hulu logo too, so I think it was just because I'm also a Hulu subscriber and an adult. It recommended this kind of crossover stuff to me, and this is a 20th century, not Fox movie. So I was, I had my little Muppet hat on and a little flag. I didn't really, but I was ready to watch this Jim Henson thing, and then it was The First Omen, and I was weirdly like, ooh, I'm going to watch that. And so I watched it because I missed it in theaters. I'm not a big Omen head. I'm not a big horror prequel head, as you can imagine, given some of my previous comments. But I did remember that The First Omen had one of the most interesting trailers. There's no more good trailers. All trailers are exactly the same. They're too long, they're too loud, they give everything away. They have like the same, like beats and sounds, and they always have like some, and this one it does the one thing of having like a weird slow minor key version of some kind of a recognizable song in it. I don't remember what it is, but I would recommend, if you haven't seen it, go and find the first trailer for The First Omen. It's a 1 minute long trailer. It's not wordless, but it doesn't have a lot of dialogue in it, and every shot in it is in reverse. And that kind of like stunt, trailer stuff doesn't always work. But in this case, I thought this was a harrowing trailer. It makes it look horrifying, and it looks beautiful as well. So I missed it in the theater, but I watched it at home in 4K with the lights off, and wow, really, really excellent, beautiful movie. I really enjoyed The First Omen. This is directed by Arkasha Stevenson, and she has a few titles that I don't recognize, but I'm going to probably dip into that back catalog because this is a director with a vision. This is a prequel to The Omen, which I saw a long time ago. I saw it too young, and I was scared, and I don't remember a lot about it. But as a standalone movie, The First Omen is incredible. It's an incredible piece of work. It's well directed. It's well cast. Nell Tiger Free is the name of the lead. She plays a young woman who is taking the vows and entering into. She's not just entering into like nunnery. She's in the Vatican. She's in Italy. She's like in the big leagues, and she has a troubled past. And she is going to become a nun, and it's about her coming. And Bill Nighy plays a cardinal who has kind of shepherded her and taken care of her, and he's nice. And if you know movies and you know horror movies, you kind of know where all this is going, whether or not you're familiar with The Omen. So this movie is a prequel, and as a result, the last 10 minutes are, you could snip them off and I'd be fine. But it manages to be excellent and terrifying and interesting and gothic, and it's stylized and heightened and scary without ever and bonkers things happen in this movie. I'm not going to describe any of them, but some things happen that if I told you, it'd be like, what? But it manages not to like jump the shark or go over the top. It always has a measure of restraint. It has like design that is restrained. It's like a combination of style and restraint that really builds a lot of tension. There are surprises. There is, of course, a twist, and I kind of guessed it, and I kind of didn't. So I was impressed. This movie also does things where it recontextualizes events. Movies are obsessed with doing this these days. We had mild spoilers for Saltburn, not for events of it, just in general, for the fact that at the end of Saltburn, it goes back and shows us, snippets of everything that's happened so far to be like, huh? Do you get it? Do you see what was really going on? When there was really no subterfuge. There was we knew exactly what was going on the entire time. That's the weirdest thing about Saltburn. I didn't hate it as much as some people did, and some people loved it. I was in the middle. But anyway, this movie does a thing where there's just one or two things that happen that seem like it's one thing when they happen, in the course of the plot, and then they get recontextualized at the end. And I thought this was the rare movie that really did that well, really plotted well. That sometimes, like, you know, the misdirect can be so extreme that then when they correct course at the end, it's like, oh, okay, but that's cheap. This one I was like, oh, that actually really makes sense. Okay, interesting. So I was really surprised by the first Omen. It is a very, very good horror movie, and this is another director to watch. So then the next day, I did not have time to stream 2 movies. You know, I'm a busy man. But I watched Jim Henson Idea Man on Disney Plus, and I got to tell you, I am a Muppet guy from way back. So I have seen every making of behind the scenes Muppets documentary thing that exists. All right, so I'm going to. I have some reservations and some criticisms about this, but I just have to say, first off, 2 things. 1, because there's so much Muppet documentary material, and 2, because we are living in an age of kind of hagiography and like letting the estate be involved, you know, in a documentary. There are so many toothless documentaries that just don't, like the recent Beach Boys documentary, I think also on Disney Plus by Frank Marshall. I haven't watched it, but from what I hear, people who are fans of the Beach Boys say there's nothing new. It just retreads everything. And so as someone who has seen so much Muppet material over the years and so much behind the scenes Muppet material, I found this to be a feast of things I hadn't seen before and perspectives I hadn't heard before. That's just in perspective, in relative to everything else that I've seen. It is a Disney production. The Hensons were involved and gave their blessing, but it's not created by them. It's directed by Ron Howard and produced by Brian Grazer, his partner. And there are no Hensons in the credits other than thanks and their appearances in the interviews. The other thing I like about this movie is it is only new interviews. It only uses archival interviews in very specific news, like story or for voiceover from Jim or Jane Henson. Other than that, when you hear from Brian Henson, when you hear from Frank Oz, when you hear from Fran Brill or Michael Frith or whoever, you are seeing a new interview with them conducted by Ron Howard's team. So that's great. And this movie touches on things. You know, this is a Disney. At the end of the day, this is a hagiography. This is a worship session for Jim Henson, who is worthy of our praise as the creator of wonderful things that endure. But they do touch on things that have not been touched on in media before, and some things that I frankly didn't know about. I did not know about some of the details of the troubled marriage of Jim and Jane Henson. I didn't know some of the behind-the-scenes stuff of how they started the business together, and then he kind of pushed her out, and she didn't want to just be a mother. She wanted to be involved, and he had a very traditional view, and I didn't know that stuff. I didn't know some of the stuff about what happened before Sesame Street kind of from the view of everyone around him, kind of rescued him from kind of going off the deep end. He was creating like he was going to create a franchise of nightclubs with like weird, basically the Sphere, basically like a 1970s version of the Sphere was going to be this domed nightclub projecting moving images all 360 degrees. And everybody thought he was kind of going crazy. And then he got the call from Children's Television Workshop, and he considered it the great curse of his life that he got sucked into children's television and then pegged as a kids TV guy. And then I knew how hard it was to sell the Muppet Show after Sesame Street, and that he couldn't sell it in America. But this documentary does go into some great detail about that, and just how very difficult it was, and then how much all the networks were kicking themselves when this thing was a huge success. And that for me is the entry point to Muppets. Yeah, I watched Sesame Street as a kid, but the Muppet Show was like captivated my imagination as a child, and still does to this day. So anyway, that's all of the positive and why this is a very good and special documentary, if it's what we're going to get. Where it fails is that it doesn't, it still has to land on, Jim Henson was a great genius who didn't really do anything wrong. But also where it really is particularly egregious is when it comes to the later years of his life and when he sold the Muppets to Disney. According to this Disney Plus produced documentary, it was his lifelong dream to sell the Muppets to Disney because he loved Disney and Disney World in particular so much that he just couldn't wait to do it, and that it was an easy, quick transaction, and he was happy and everyone was happy. It doesn't even hint at the decade-long battle and the misery around selling the Muppets to Disney, and how Disney didn't particularly treat Henson or the Muppets very well. Some would argue that they still don't know what to do with it. So that's it. Yeah, a fun watch, very well made. But if you have Disney Plus and you like the Muppets, it's a no-brainer that you're going to watch this. And it's very well done, and there's a lot of great stuff in there. There's stuff that I hadn't seen before. And it's a slightly more complicated dissection of a complicated man than we've ever had before. So I guess I'm grateful for it on that level. This is Complicated Man Josh saying thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy my reviews or my riffs or anything else that I do, you can support me here as a member on the channel. You can like and subscribe. You can also join us on patreon.com/joshway, where I post these videos early. So thank you so much. I'll be back with more very soon. I hope you have a lovely day, and take care. Bye. Josh out. Hey, addendum. One thing I forgot to talk about in regards to the Henson documentary, the big thing for me, is that I've always heard the story that Jim Henson died because he was a Christian Scientist who refused to get treatment for pneumonia, and he died. This documentary is very pointed, very, very specific and assertive to say that is not the case. Multiple people say he was not a Christian Scientist. He did not refuse treatment. You just wonder if this is, I'm curious about this because the kind of superficial nature of this documentary, they will throw kind of these big things at you and then they'll just brush past them. But I believe it's Brian Henson and Frank Oz who both say at separate points that Jim was not a Christian Scientist. He simply was stubborn and he refused to stop working ever. And so he pushed through with pneumonia several times, and this was just the time that it caught up with him and he didn't survive. But I just found that interesting. I don't know if that's a little bit of damage control or if that's they're trying to polish the legacy or what, but I found that very interesting, and I should have mentioned it in my original comments. All right, that's all.